and Joanna was kind enough to send me the video. I started watching the video and watched the whole thing, and then when the minutes came out, and I saw the comments from the mayor that was not part of the video. So I don't mean to be a pain, but the fact is that those comments were made prior to the meeting being called to order. So what I would like to offer is to amend the minutes to include that Mayor McEachran made comments prior to the committee meeting being called to order. A synopsis of his comments is included for informational purposes only. Because if you didn't call the meeting to order, it can't be part of the minutes.
I'll accept that as part of the motion to accept.
Is everyone fine with that?
I wasn't here, so.
Alteration, okay. Great, any other comments?
The mayor did also explicitly state that before the meeting comes to order, I'd like to share some remarks. He kind of couched it that way, so I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. All in favor of adoption of the minutes with the amendments?
Aye.
Aye.
I have to abstain because I wasn't here at the last meeting.
Same. Very good. Thank you. And let's go back to the municipal space needs assessment progress.
Thank you everyone for your time. So since we last met, our team has been really focused on two avenues. One has been building out the municipal space needs assessment that we'll discuss today, as well as getting our engineering surveys underway to understand the infrastructure side of the facility. So we'll discuss the municipal space needs first. It's important to note in the prior months we met with each of the departments to have a first pass to understand their needs, their pay points, their adjacencies, their opportunities, and then that fed into the space needs assessment that you have today. This is where it stands as of to date. We will need to meet with city staff and departments again multiple times as this process goes on to finalize those numbers, to fine tune them, to tweak them, to get feedback. But this is a snapshot of where we stand today and the overall trend of where we're landing. I just want to make clear that this is not final and that there is more refinement to happen with multiple parties' inputs. This group,
Nothing is ever final.
not until it's built, and even then. So overall speaking, we think, we referenced previously that there's opportunities to make the building more efficient and thereby reduce the overall condition. And I think we're still trending in that direction. All in all, on the municipal space side, we see at this point the possibility of saving up to 11,500 square feet of space from what the municipal side occupies currently. That would be presuming that we do a heavy amount of renovation to realize all those efficiencies. We've talked previously that there's efficiencies to be gained in storage, and there's greatly efficiencies to be gained in office spaces. When the building was first occupied, it was one hospital room or two hospital rooms. Things are oversized. Now, to realize all those efficiencies, you also have to do a lot of renovation. We don't expect that we're going to touch every single part of this campus, at least at this immediate future at this point in time. So the way that we presented it's called, the ticker, if you will, this sheet, was an upper threshold and a lower threshold. That was something that we discussed the last meeting on the police space needs side, and we want to present that as the municipal side. The 11,500 savings we could potentially realize would mean that overall the municipal side might need as little as 55,000 square feet and change. At its maximum, it would be essentially doing little renovation, not realizing those efficiencies, and keeping the square footage more or less the way it is to date. That would be sort of the high threshold. Those all lining up, we could see a change from either fitting everything into the building as it is with a little bit of room to spare, or the need at most of an addition of like 10,000 square feet. I would expect, just if you take sort of the mean of that, the average between those two, that's an overall addition of 2,300 square feet or so. We're gonna end up somewhere in those thresholds, depending on how much we do or don't do, how much the building lets us get those efficiencies or not. But that overall is the trend of, that we're, going towards right now, which I think is an overall positive development. As I said previously, there's gonna be more refinement of the municipal side numbers as we meet with departments again, confirm what we heard the first time, and work out efficiencies. We heard you need a conference room, you need a conference room. Hey, can we share these two? Let's talk about scheduling. Things like that. Storage, we've heard loosely, we need to have this, we can ditch, we have 3 storage rooms, we can live with one, these 2 can go. So that's what we've sort of carried in the space needs assessment. We'll need to then be more granular about that.
And this assumes schools stay here, dispatch stays here, everything that's here stays here.
Yes, with one caveat. So this space needs right now assumes that all departments that are on campus stay on campus. We're not in a position to presume that at this point in time, and that keeps everyone there. Now, there may be options where that could be the case, which we would, city staff, city manager to help guide, but right now that's presuming everyone stays here. The only presumption that we have made in this, that we noted, is regarding storage spaces. We know that this building is not ideal for long-term storage for a host of reasons. Mainly, it's the climate control is difficult. The miles of pipes above. So the assumptions that we have made is that where departments have indicated that they could digitize or move storage off-site, we have sort of made that assumption that would occur. So for example, in the inspections department, they currently have closets and closets of plans and about 30 file cabinets worth of things. We've presumed that gets digitized over time. The other thing we have done is in the archive space currently in the basement of the building, that's about 1,300 square feet, I believe it is, of space. We've presumed that anything that's in there would either be moved off-site or gets consolidated elsewhere on campus. There's a chunk of stuff in there that probably would be off-site, and then there's a handful of things that is sort of city clerk property that ideally they would want to have in the vault, but they currently can't because the vault is not sized for it. So what we've assumed is a larger vault moving forward, which was something we discussed with them. So we would consolidate some of that storage, and then others would move off-site. So we're not at the point where we have we have 100 lineal feet of books and we need 50 of it, but that's the overall basis of that projection right now.
We just stopped because
It's back. There we go, maybe we're back.
So one of the things that came out of that was helping us identify all the areas where documents might be able to be digitized. And so we're going to be pulling all that information together to be able to get quotes on doing it all as a larger project as part of this to free up some of that space. But it was helpful to go around and determine what all the needs were.
Carl, has that work been done, or are you saying that's underway?
It's underway. Part of this laid the foundation was understanding a little bit more of working documents versus what do you actually need to have in your space. We have a lot of requirements to store some things forever, but that doesn't mean they have to be
State,
stored
federal,
here.
whatever, various regulations got
So we're working through all that. We want to do a big consolidated look and then quote that out so we understand the cost of doing that.
Right.
Picking up on what you just mentioned, Kyle, you had mentioned before that some of the documents that are maintained in paper form as a requirement, as a law, if you will. Is that fair representation of what you said?
Yeah, so we're going through to make sure that we meet the state requirements for any retention based on some things are paper, some things can be electronic. We're just trying to make sure we wade through, and in addition to that, working documents versus things that they could access electronically. Even if we have to store the actual hard copy somewhere else, we're trying to get working electronic documents instead.
But I'm going to take it a little different direction just for a second. As we go through this process, is there opportunity to work with our legislative delegation to change some of these laws? In other words, if some of this stuff has been in place for years, because that's what they had was paper, is there an opportunity now to work legislatively to change some of this and loosen things up for us?
There's always an opportunity to change things legislatively, whether it would be successful or not.
Yeah.
It depends on the politics of the moment.
Right, so I mean, but I'm just saying that while we're going through this process and looking at all of these documents, it might be an opportunity to look at that option to at least bring
Have a
it to the
conversation.
table. Yeah. Thank you.
In thinking this through, there's something that came up at the first iteration of this with the working group that I think is very important and I haven't heard talked about yet. It's the security issue with at least a portion of the police station, that it meets the IBC Category 4 security requirements. I don't know in your consideration of space in this building if there has been or is going to be a consideration of what it would take to, if it was going to, the police department was going to stay fully in this building as opposed to a something of an addition, what it would take to make space in this building Category 4 compliant.
So we have had that conversation. There's fine tuning to be had that's still underway, but we've had that conversation and gotten a general concurrence with the building inspector. So the overarching conclusion of that is the existing facility, a large portion of it, is already been being used as Category 4 space. Now it's not built currently to current standards, but it was Category 4. It is being used as
That was
Category 4.
back in like 1990.
And we are permitted to continue to use the building as a Category 4 use because we already occupy it. So we're not limited in being able to expand with a nuance within the existing facility because we're already using it in that manner. Now there will be some boundaries to that. Where we already don't have police functions like in the Seibel building, we would not want to touch that building because once we start to expand into there, that would start to trigger, we believe, upgrades that we wouldn't want to do. But generally speaking, in this portion of the building, we can expand within that without triggering seismic and snow load implications. The main thing we have to look at is as we change uses of spaces, say an office space to an assembly space, we have to verify that the structure can hold that live load. And that's something that is underway.
My concern of grandfathering in this building, which was long ago, I think 30 years it was Category 4, is there will be no space in Portsmouth if we have hurricane, a significant event, be it seismic or tidal or other weather, that is Category 4, and so the police will be at risk of not having a safe space within which to operate. That is, with dispatch, with space that we know will survive that kind of event, and that's what I am worried would be missing if we grandfather in the very old Category 4 compliance.
Staff could.
Can comment on that because I think
Yeah.
Fire Station 2 might have
Correct.
some.
Fire Station 2 does. Yeah, there are some facilities that meet Category 4 requirements. It's worth just repeating one thing before we move to that. Just going back one step, the difference between now and our previous design rounds are if we construct an addition to this facility, the addition must be built to Category 4.
Absolutely.
Anything-
Current category.
To current Category 4 standards, correct. The idea of determining exactly what has changed on the code and what would be required to bring sections of this building up to current code is not an exercise that is worth doing. It's not something that we should shy away from. We should we have
should understand it.
yeah, we have very detailed structural drawings of this building. The consultants have them now, and there's a code consultant on board that could help guide us through that.
I recall two things. One, Fire Station 2 would unlikely that it would be able to function as a police station in addition to a fire station if we were to have a seismic event or some event of that category. Number one. Number two, I recall in the first working group, Tony Coviello became a member of it. He is a civil engineer.
Structural,
Excuse me?
he's a structural engineer.
Structural engineer, sorry. And he was pretty adamant that we'd be nuts not to be Category 4 compliant in present terms, not in grandfathering terms. And part of my strength of feeling on this relies on what Tony said. So I just want to put that on the table. It's going to be, I think, to me, it's a very important issue. And I appreciate that Category 4 compliance, if the police station were to stay in this building, is a lot more expensive. I don't think we need to be honest about not shying away from Category 4 compliance, current Category 4 compliance, simply because we want to save money. That is not a reason to shy away from present-day Category 4 compliance.
If I could, we went through this exercise at the senior center when we acquired the senior center and we renovated it. We had a study done to determine exactly what it would take to bring that building up to a much higher level of category. And we had a report from a structural engineer who gave us very clear direction on how to do that. So it's a common exercise to do, and
I think it's worth us doing that exercise.
I think what I heard from Joe is that he wants to do that exercise in this process.
Yeah.
Sure.
So let's have Mr. Chalman speak next, and I've noted your concerns, Commissioner Schur. I want to make sure we have time to actually discuss what's in front of us today, and we have such limited time. And so that's something that we will come back to, the IBC 4 category.
I want to go back to what Richard was saying before, and that's a good point, and I agree it's something we should think about. But isn't the big, huge news here that there's a possibility of achieving the goal that this committee was set out to try to achieve at the beginning? And that is that it is potentially possible to fit what we need to fit in this building with perhaps a small addition. It's preliminary, it's not set.
Mhm.
That's big news.
It is.
I agree.
I agree.
I don't think we should,
I think that depends. It may depend on this Category 4 issue.
I think first we have to settle that question. Then, if that is in fact a reality, then we can say, okay, here's what we can do, what the city can do. Now, if we go to Category 4 or whatever else there might be, maybe it can be, we can achieve the goal, but in achieving the goal, we found some other deficiency that we ought to take a closer look at, perhaps. You know, I think, but let's not lose sight of the big picture, is my point. And that's huge news.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So let's not lose sight of that.
I agree.
And I'm a police commissioner, and I can't lose sight of the police department and the piece that I just raised. I don't want us to get all excited about what seems like big news, and I agree. To do that, we do something that is not in the interest of the police department.
I'm not advocating any
I don't think
irresponsible
anyone's
position.
advocating that.
So I just want to temper the big news.
I mean, we've been working on the capital improvements plan, big dollars, long-term planning, and the planning board has to get closely involved in that, so this does relate to that.
Yeah.
So it's not, and I'm sensitive to your concern, not dismissing it at all. One step at a time, that's all I'm saying.
Mr. Weed?
I just want to reiterate again that it's not this committee's charge on considering a separate police station off-site.
I disagree with that.
Pardon me?
I disagree with that. I think it should-
But that's not what the mayor said.
Yeah, folks, we're gonna get into a whole different tangent here if we get into that discussion. I think that's settled.
It's quite settled, and it's in our charter.
Well, what do you mean by off-site? Is that eliminate the possibility of an addition to this building? What does that turn
That's
into?
on
On
site.
this campus.
On
No, no,
this campus.
it'll be on this campus, I think
Okay,
the concern is,
yeah,
yes.
that was settled by the original
Yeah.
that was settled by the original working group.
Yeah.
That's never been a realistic thing.
Okay, all right.
We will, to Joe's point, yours, we will work to understand what it would take so that we can understand it, we can cost it, and that can, play into our options.
Thank you.
Our police station needs to be operating in the event of,
A disaster.
a disaster, it's there.
I would just add that if you look at the scheme of the building, the police are over on the left, it's very unlikely that we'd need police space in Seabold.
No, I would, while never discounting any option at this point, I would completely agree. But it doesn't, in the long term, that wouldn't, I don't see that making.
There are potentially spaces that would function for the police department don't
That as well.
have. So we're keeping that in mind as a balance.
And the original, so I apologize for this. The original, with the original working group, it won't shut up. For the original working group, it was not anticipated that the entire police station would be category 4. I mean, we've always been sensitive to that.
Okay. On to engineering?
Engineering.
So engineering wise, our engineers have been working over the past month to go through, walk through the innards and outs of the building with city staff to make sure we understand the existing systems. There,
Are we dealing with any of this right now?
no, not at the moment.
Trying to see if there's a packet on engineering for that.
No, I intentionally did not include that yet because it's still underway, so I don't.
Okay.
Perfect.
So this is just a space zone.
And this is, so all of this is the space needs, and I guess in the interest of time, we'll touch on anything and then come back as 10 minutes. Okay. Engineering wise, they've been working to understand the existing building systems and in progress on finalizing their report, sort of outlining it all in detail. But I just wanted to share sort of a couple high level things, and then Joe, feel free to chime in as you know the building you're better. Generally speaking, just a couple key points. One is that the cottage building, which is part of this campus and connected, does not share utilities with the rest of this building. They are standalone buildings from a system standpoint, which is important, something we were able to verify, but it wasn't clear in the beginning. We know this, that occupied renovations of the building are going to be difficult. So our ability to use swing spaces to get departments off-site so that we can at least take portions of the building for construction is going to be very important, particularly with systems, because while you might be only touching this space architecturally with walls, systems go much further. It's just something to reiterate, we have to acknowledge. Mechanical systems is going to be the most difficult part of probably all the MVP work, the most extensive, the most difficult to isolate. There's been a lot of work that's been done to keep the building operational and replacements that have been happening, but there's still a lot of work on the main infrastructure part to get it, where we would want it to be, particularly with ventilation and old systems. One opportunity we think we will probably have that's going to help with this in terms of space needs, as well as the penthouse on top of the building, is really only half, 2/3 functioning at the moment. There's a good chunk of square footage up there that is previous outdated equipment that's no longer in use right now. It's essentially abandoned in place. So our ability to try to utilize that space for future mechanical needs is going to help save us space in the future. We did preliminarily talk with our engineers about the mechanical space in the, within the PD and our ability to, can that remain? Does it have the ability to move? Without committing 100% to it, I think there might be an opportunity we could free up some space there, but there is a portion of stuff in there today, particularly around the chiller, that really would want to remain, just because the amount of piping and infrastructure that feeds that space already, it would be a lot of work. Not to say we can't, but I know that's something that we've loosely talked about before, is how could we utilize that space better? And I think there will be a portion that will always want to be mechanical. Plumbing wise, there's a mix. It's a mix of certainly we know the obvious things, which are all the plumbing fixtures that have been around since it was still a hospital, that would all want to be updated as we do work to make it more accessible, functional, current, and not have tiny little fire protection system is generally in good shape. It's really been updated as we've done work and would continue to do so. Electrically, we have the benefit that there was a lot of work done in the past couple of years to redo the electrical system. We have the whole building generator. So the main infrastructure, that back end is in great shape, which is we expected, but confirms as much. A lot of that electrical work is going to be in the lighting fixtures, the controls, which are there's a lot of fluorescent, which is energy inefficient, a lot of just toggle switches. So there would be work to do there as we update spaces, all manageable. And similar to with the fire alarm system, it's a mix, and it's been upgraded as work has been done. Interest of time, I think I'd probably leave it generally as that. I think the biggest key part MVP wise to understand, define, and manage is going to be the mechanical and HVAC. How we improve the heating and cooling of the building without letting it become the entire project. And how
project in and of itself.
it's a huge project in itself, and also how do we segment it in a way to make it work with phase construction and phase work? The idea that this might not be one whole swoop. This is going to happen over years. So how can we define it in the manageable portions, manageable bites? So once our engineers have finalized their existing report, one of the next steps is going to be defining the recommendations for future systems. Consideration being how do we phase it? How do we segment it to make it work with the project's scope, budget, and phasing?
And to accommodate for any future need if we need to push stuff off.
Sure.
So a lot of that would be strategies of getting distribution vertically so that it can be tapped into with discrete future projects.
Is there anything you think is worth adding at this point in a brief summary?
Oh, that was very thorough. You just mentioned distribution. When we looked at this in the past, the benefit of the administration building, the sidewalk building, is there are attics that run the full length. So there's a possibility of running mechanical line sets through the attics and then down through, chases that some exist and some could be built into corners of walls. But that's the big concern mechanically and with the entire project, to be honest with you, is working within the occupied building and the tolerance that the staff and the public are going to have for it'll become more and more invasive. There's a tolerance level that we hit where it just becomes too intense. So we have to, it's a very delicate, the phasing of all of that will become very important.
We can't work on Fridays after 1 to get the job done.
Exactly, like we do now, little projects Fridays after 1, yeah.
Other questions, but yes.
We had spoken a few times about the high school using space. Is that still on the table for,
Swing space.
or for moving storage, or is there any way that we can use that?
I think we're looking at all the options of any buildings that we have that have space to store things, and we're looking at potentially, are there buildings that we could move staff into periodically? Can we move some folks over to Public Works for a little while? We're looking at all those options that when we get to that plan, that'll be important to say, what buildings do we own and can swing into periodically during the construction? Yeah, absolutely.
Until we've gotten to the point that we have our options and we know the potential phasing, it's hard to say how much space would be needed. So I think to make that more detailed, other than sort of the broad statement we have and knowing generally what spaces are available in the city, that's something that we get fine-tuned.
And also was mentioned, the security issue relative. I mean, it's nice to say we've got some empty rooms at the high school, but this high school has to have security associated with it, so you can't have people coming and going, that type of thing, so.
question on HVAC if no one, see, what, it sounds like we're planning on reutilizing some of the current system. Is that accurate? Because I think our current system is very challenging.
Not necessarily. We're not, I mean, we're looking at the potential for mini splits. That it's a cassette-driven system,
Yes.
but it's large scale,
Mhm.
and it can be broken into segments. The renovations that we've done to date do allow for 4-pipe system. Currently, we have a 2-pipe system, so you either have heat on or chilling on, not both. A 4-pipe system gives you the ability to do both. So the thought was that those fan coil units would still be usable, and we weren't wasting that money. But Joe, I mean, is there?
Yeah, we've been replacing fan coil units over the past 5 years. 20 at a time, and that is invasive as well, because it's not just taking it out and replacing it. What we keep finding is we're chasing the piping. You go to shut it off, you can't shut it off. But we made sure that we specified the new fan coil units are modern units that we can tap into for a future for a new system. So it's not stranded investment.
You know, the downside is it's an enormously inefficient system. The upside is we can replace an enormously inefficient system with something that,
Yeah.
you know, is more energy efficient, as your consultancy EI told me, Energy Committee. Big opportunities there.
Yeah, EI was also reusing a lot of the fan coil units that we put in, so they understood that was. So
That's what I'm trying to find out, like, what are we salvaging versus what is
We're
gonna be
we're not at
replaced?
the stage where we can say for sure where our engineers have made a recommendation of this is what we think you should do, or here's what we think the 2 viable options are, and here are the pros and cons. That's as part of the next steps.
Okay.
That's sort of where our guts at right now.
I think it's safe to say that we're several generations apart from the system that's in use here and current technology.
Sure.
Did you say 7?
Several.
Several.
No, I didn't want to give you any numbers.
Several.
No.
Years.
Are there
Yeah.
code requirements of what we need if we are dealing with improvement?
Yes. Absolutely. It has mostly to do with fresh air, ventilation. That we don't have in some places, in locations right now in this building. It's challenging.
Also known as the basement.
Yeah.
Engineering?
I think for the sake of our time, that's probably.
Any questions?
Did everyone have a chance to see the answers to the prior questions? Is there any follow-on?
As long as they're all still under consideration.
Yes, no, absolutely, and some of them, it's a definite yes, and then a lot of it is in consideration, and it's gonna depend on the plan. Particularly, like the question of adding an additional elevator, and whether that's needed or not is really gonna depend on the layout and whether that gets incorporated fully into the police department space or not. A lot of those are all gonna get sussed out as we look at the options.
The only other question I had, and it's come up before, and I think Renee brought it up today, where do we stand on the school apartments amount of space in this building? And is there space available for them in one of their own buildings?
So I think in the bigger picture, then when you look at the walking schemes that you'll see later on, you'll look at where staff would be located throughout the building, and then I think you'll get at some point recommendations from the city manager of where staff may be relocated to, or in the building or somewhere else. And so the city manager will work out that plan as we get closer to the efficiencies of space. And so that's a decision that the city manager will make and make recommendations around where people may be located.
I guess my concern on that is it would be nice to know right now what the school apartment occupies within this building. And if they move out, what will be available for other uses?
Yeah, but
And I I think that was one of the things in our initial thing is whether or not the school department needs to be in this building.
I think, and we'll get answers to that, and the other is you may see other things that currently exist here that might go somewhere else, and we're looking at that bigger picture because some functional uses may be better suited somewhere else. Like, parking used to be here, and now parking's down at the garage, and so you see that there's allocation of space based on where it makes the most sense.
I would just like to go back and at some point know exactly what the school department is using in this building, square footage wise.
We know that.
Well, you do, we don't.
We can answer that.
We have that right there, which including sort of their walls and the allocation of corridor space, it's about 5,900 square feet.
Okay.
And then within the SNA, there's a more detailed breakdown of, there's 10 offices at this square feet and storage of this. That is contained within this, so you can see the existing and then what we would currently propose as the new at this snapshot in time.
Mr. O'Leary?
I get two comments relative to that. First of all, I don't believe it's our job to decide where people should be in the city. That's the manager's job. And I think that we'll get direction from the manager with regards to that, and I think that's what Kyle's indicating, that that's part of the process. The second thing I just want to mention is that when people talk about moving, let's say, moving the school department to another building, there's a cost associated with that. That other building has to be renovated to accept those office spaces. So that, I don't mind looking at that, but it's not that, okay, there's 3 empty classrooms over at the high school, we can just move the school department over there. There's costs associated with that will come out of our budget. So again, but as far as where people are going to be located, I don't believe that's our job, that's the manager's job.
You make a very good point, Charlie. I think it's not just the analysis of where people go, but as we get further in this process, I think this is what we keep hearing. We will find out if we are trending towards an addition or not needing an addition. And when we get to that point, then the city manager will probably weigh in on this department could go here in existing space to potentially save money rather than doing an addition or not. And so I think that we will get to that point down the road. But also, we also have to determine, and this is part of the whole calculation, is where all this storage does go that we do need for offsite storage, because that also costs money. So that's also a piece of the project, and so is the digitization. So it's kind of still a moving issue.
And the only thing I would add to that is there's also just the operational piece of, as we move potentially to a point of service, there will be relocations just because, there are certain things that need public access, need to be adjacent to each other for overlap or adjacencies. So I think you'll see more of that when we get into the sort of March timeframe as we outlined in the memo. But you're right, the manager will weigh in on some of those pieces of both operational, but also just where does it make sense from a space.
So we're very early on in this whole process, and we're talking maybe 5 years, who knows? And I'm wondering, by the time everything is completed, and I'm wondering, what is the plan for the next couple of years until things move along for the police department, for their health and safety? Is that part of this discussion here, or is that a city manager issue?
That's part of the facilities issue. That's an existing facilities issue, and we would, continue to maintain the space and improve the spaces as, appropriate.
Right.
So, it's really maintaining existing facilities.
I think that's so important to know the timeline of this too at some point, because we know what the facility looks like now. We know what the 2 lower levels of the police department look like. So will there be improvements? Is it coming out of a major budget to make improvements between now and a finished product?
I would add to that as came up, I'll leave where it came up. not wowing people who are thinking about, police officers who are thinking about working at the Portsmouth Police Department with our current facility. And we're very close to a crisis moment in staffing at the police department because of the low numbers of police officers. So in terms of, I bring this up because of timeline, 5 years down the way for the police station to be in whatever its new configuration is going to be, is just going to increase problems significantly. And I don't want us to underestimate that in terms of thinking about timeline.
One of the things, just that I don't think you've had the benefit of a lot of these meetings, but we recognize there's a number that we need to work to. And as we're still studying things, it's very likely that we will have a multi-phased concept, which is what gets to that 5-year number. What's the first thing we do? Where do we spend the money initially? I think there's an obvious priority towards this police department. It's sort of the front burner for the longest time. But
10 years.
well, yeah, a long time. So, and I recognize the implications of the existing facility continuing to be utilized. They're high priorities, and they're priorities. So we're going to have X number of dollars. We're going to have an idea of what the whole project's going to look like when all said and done. And the number might be this, and the project may be this. So here's our first 2 years. Here's our second 2. Here's our next 1, or whatever it is. I did that to add up to 5.
I think everybody should be aware that the council just adopted a CIP budget, and this is not funded in the 27 budget, it's funded in the 28 budget. So we're a year and a half out at a minimum from even having funding to start a project.
Does that mean the funding that was in a CIP at least 2, maybe 3 years ago for a police station, which was at $42 million, that the council has removed that from the CIP?
No, it's still there. I'm just saying it's in year 28. And everybody should be aware of that because it's going to take that long to go through this planning process to know where we need to be. And so it's going to take a while to get final plans in place, and we have all the funding that's already secured for that.
Yeah.
That process is already funded, and that money is already there. It's the $38 million that's still left out to actually fund the improvements. So
Just, again, I can't emphasize enough how even 2 years out continues to be a big problem for the police department.
I'm sorry, can we just go back to the funding? So the funding is there. How much funding was there last year for the new police department? What did you say?
the funding hasn't changed at all.
How much was it?
It started at 42 million. There's 38 million still that is unfunded. The first portion of that is funded, and that was funded for design and planning. And so, and that's the process we're going through now. So,
38 is approved, but has not been drawn against
it's
at
not
all.
approved.
Not
It's
approved.
in
It's in the CIP.
It's in the
In the
plan. It's in
CIP
the
is a
CIP
planning,
plan.
is a planning
So
document.
the first 4.5 was approved, and that was for this.
It's for
And
this
we're
process.
drawing against that right now.
The 38 million remaining needs to be bonded. And
Authorized.
to be bonded, we need a 2/3 vote
Right.
of the city
Right.
council. That's what's left to happen with the 38 million.
Right.
We need some architects' plans too.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
well, the bond would be in support of some.
The authorizations and what's there, we'll provide a summary of that.
I think that would be incredibly helpful because
Timing
I think
of it.
there's a lot of confusion about timelines and how this can happen and the process. And that 38 million is a placeholder now. We're waiting to get feedback so we know exactly kind of what we're looking at as far as process and
We'll
time.
do a summary of that, of what's been to date, actions to date.
And I would just say, Commissioner Scher, to your concerns and Chief Newport's concerns, yes, we had a plan to build a wing that was close to $42 million. it would have been very hard, I think, to get public confidence behind that. And that led us to the process we're in now, where we've actually discovered there is ample space. We found efficiencies that we can wring out of this building to put it all under the existing roof. So I think that's how we've ended up here. It's taken longer, but I think this plan would have far greater public confidence.
I appreciate that.
Therefore might get approved by the council.
Yeah, that's what really matters. I appreciate that. I disagree that we now know that we can put it all in this building. We haven't sorted out the IBC Category 4 issue, and that's not an insubstantial issue. So I don't want us all to leave this meeting saying, we now know we can put it all in this building. We don't know if we need to have, if we do the Category 4 compliance even in this building, we can do that. We just have to pay a certain amount of money, which we don't know what that
Which we
would
don't
be.
have.
Yeah. So
Which we
I
won't.
think conceptually is, I think what we're saying. Conceptually, there is sufficient space, and now
There's
the work
space.
that you're alluding to needs to be completed. And I don't think there's any disagreement in this room that that work needs to be completed. That's what I heard from Joe and from Peter and from the folks from our architect friends at the other end of the table. I'm not getting a sense, Rick, no one today has given me the impression that we don't want to complete that work. And my understanding is that between now and our next meeting, some of that work might start to unfold in terms of drilling into the specifics of this, which is a first cut. And it's a huge amount of progress in this first cut, but there's a ton more work to be done. And I think what you're asking for are a number of those steps in very specific detail, which is great. We should do that.
And I'm also concerned about the time.
Of course.
We've
And
been at this
time
for
is
3
fighting-
years now.
Yeah, time is fighting against us.
So we're doing the best
I'm
we
one day
can.
closer to death than I was yesterday.
So
We all are.
everybody needs to, we're doing the best we can. The architects can only move so quickly. So we're moving as quickly as we can, but it involves a lot of meetings and a lot of process. And you all know that we are finally kind of getting some results now. And so we will continue to do so. Did everyone have a chance to look at what we expect as next steps?
To summarize in all of 30 seconds, we would look in the next meeting to start discussing point of service ideas, concepts around the municipal point of service, the police station, lobby, and sort of its core elements of dispatch booking, the Sally Port. So those core elements that we need to consider, because those are the elements that are going to drive everything else. Other stuff is more flexibility, but those are the key parts. So we're going to focus on those to vet out what is viable. Meanwhile, working in the background on also the rest of the bigger picture. But we want to make sure we have the opportunity to review all of those bigger picture steps with city staff, with departments, before bringing them here, because they should have the opportunity to provide input first. And that takes some time.
Do we have a sense of when we're gonna start seeing cost elements laid out? Just because I know that's gonna make a huge difference in everything we talk about. But I'm just curious in terms of time, when we might start seeing that.
It's to be able to provide detailed costs that we have real confidence in is going to come at the end when our estimator has time to go over all of it. When we have an outline of all of the MEP, we know that we're going to target as small and efficient as possible in our options, and we can have our estimators try to do some back checking on us. But I don't think we would want to commit to any of those numbers until we have a full understanding at the end of the day.
So when you say the end or the end of the day, some sense of when that is?
April.
I'm not asking you to lock you into it now, but I want to have some sense.
I think this is the important factor, is the next budgetary cycle is November.
Right. So if
so
we
the
wanted to
next
have
time
it in
the council-
27,
Right.
we would need to have it approved by November.
And November is when the CIP comes to the council again.
For voting, yeah.
Right, so.
I don't see that being a problem at all.
That's spectacular.
That's,
I think we're gonna have a first pass.
that's a,
We're not gonna like the first pass.
The first pass is gonna be
We'll
what,
see.
April,
We might.
May,
We
June?
might like
No,
it.
we
Okay.
might, but it's,
Right.
my experience has been that you never like the first pass. But it opens up a lot of very positive discussions about what we can do, when we can do it, so.
And,
that's-
you know, I
So
agree with
April,
that,
May
and
is a
that's,
great
that's
time.
why I
It gives
want
us
the,
time to-
the time to be sooner rather than later, so we can do the
Yeah,
back
it's
and
gotta,
forth.
but it's gotta be realistic. I don't want a number being thrown out because it's trying to meet a timeline.
I'm not asking for that.
I want a number being thrown out that
Because
they
we've
can
done the
stand
hard work to
behind.
try and
Yeah.
make it most efficient.
Than right now.
Let's,
Key is the next meeting would really be the beginning of February and then March. And I think probably in that February, we'll have a better timeline of when you might start seeing some preliminary things. It's the work in February and March that will help get us to.
We'll yield a number.
Will yield the number, because these are the next two important pieces of just conceptually.
Yeah.
Does this make sense where we may lay things out, which then will drive the project? So I think those next two meetings will be important.
we're gonna start to get into, to plans and sort of more fun things to look at than only
We're starting-
spreadsheets
we're
in
gonna start
isolation.
having fun.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, two quick questions. I asked a question to do you have the results of the priorities that this committee put together?
From last year.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are published on the committee's
website.
page.
The second quick question is, this is a Blue Ribbon Committee, it sunsets, if you will. What is the application process? Do we know what that is, or how's that gonna be handled?
So the mayor came to our last meeting and said that he's planning to reappoint the committee. If there are further instructions for the committee, we will make sure the committee receives
Okay,
it.
good, thank you.
But it'll take 2 council meetings because we have to name the appointees.
Yeah.
And then
And then
have
vote
the
on
next meeting.
But if we're not meeting till February, that's not a big deal.
Well, that's why we have to meet.
That's why we're meeting in February.
I just want to reiterate something that Councilor Tapler said that I think is really important. Public confidence in this project along the timeline has not been high. Getting this first number wrong will be a catastrophic problem.
Yeah.
So the better right than right now sentiment is crucially important because the project has, I think, a higher probability than people necessarily understand of just getting stalled because people don't like the number. So let's get it right so that we can deliver something awesome for Mark and his team and they can go do an awesome job as they do every day because they work really hard and we should be working hard for them.
And reiterate what Cameron said, it's gotta be a saleable by recommendation of this committee to the council, and then the council be in favor of it and moving forward for funding.
And we're hoping we're gonna get there.
This is my last meeting. I put my resignation in. I think it really needs someone who has not a nursing background, but a more project-oriented engineering background. So I've appreciated the year being on this committee, and I will follow up and ask many similar questions to what I've been asking over several months. But I thank all of you for all of your work, and carry on.
And you've been very focused on the safety of our police.
Well, that's why I came on, because of the health and safety of the police department, and because I saw that massive rendering. So that was really my spur to request to be on this committee. And as we're paying attention, I hope, to the safety, health and safety of the police department, I think that's most important.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your service to
You're
us.
welcome.
to this committee.
So do we have a date for the next meeting?
It's unlikely to be the first week of
Second week,
February, because we need 2 council meetings, and that council meeting is the 2nd. Are we looking at the 4th or the 11th? The 4th is that first week, the 11th of February is the 2nd.
Do you think that 11th is realistic with the timeline?
The council has its second meeting on February 2nd, so the committee could be reappointed by February 2nd. So the 11th is reasonable.
I think that's
2/11.
tended plan on 2/11 then.
26.
And then we will likely follow in March with the second Wednesday in March as well, which is also the 11th. So note that on your, yeah, note that on your calendars.
Thank you very much.
Super.
Good, perfect. And is there, we have about a minute and a half. Is there any public comment?
I'm Sue Sterry. I live on Broad Street. I've been to 2 of these meetings now, and what I hear and why I became interested is once it switched from just being the police station to the whole building. I mean, it's a brand new project, so what, not to ignore what happened in just the police commission or the police group the first time around, this is about the whole facility, so it's a totally different dynamic, and we have to think about the safety for everybody. And I hear that people keep going back to just the police station when this is, while that's very important, it, you know, anybody had to realize that once we changed the scope from just the police station, it was a whole new project and whole different eyes looking on it and how it was gonna go. And it is frustrating, but that's what people voted or what the council went through. So I just wanted to point that out because this is a lot of work, and I've lived here all my life. And like John said, we need to do it right. And I think most people in the community, once they understand it's the whole building, it's not just the police station, there'll be a lot more support, you know, for it, regardless of what the money is. Of course, we always want it to be less, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have to cut public comment off. It's 4 o'clock. Motion to adjourn.
You got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.